Hello and welcome to the solutions for Chapter 2, the first part. I wanted to go over these because I want you to see what you missed and why you missed them. So once I give you the codes for what you've missed, you can go back and see and watch this video and see what you missed and what the codes match up to. I also want to stress that the visual layouts that most of you are using is not what people are going to be expecting. There was text that spread across, a screen and a half. The formatting of percentages wasn't there. Doing the correct sorting wasn't done. Not using your formulas correctly. And just things like that you need to know that these are little things that are costing you points and they'll be more severe in the future. So I graded this first one rather easily, but please start watching for your mistakes that you're making. So here we have the solutions for problem number 1. So it should be quantitative, categorical, categorical, quantitative, categorical. So the first one, A, asks for your age. Well, that's a number that you're putting in, so that is quantitative. It says, are you male or female? For the B, so that's categorical. No numbers there. C says, when did you first start reading the Wall Street Journal? And it gives you options: high school, college, early career, and so on. So each one of those would be categorical. Then D, how long have you been in your present job or position? That's going to require you to put in a number of some type. So again, quantitative. E, what type of vehicle are you considering for your next purchase? Then it says there are different response categories of sedan, sports car, and so on. Again, those are all categorical. If you missed any of these, I took off half a point. Okay, for problem number 3, then you have the following. So I want you to sort the carriers on the current year percentage in descending order. Most of you got this correct, but some of you didn't. So be careful that you're reading what it's saying and that descending order is from highest to lowest. And then as we scroll down, you'll see then you needed to do some conditional formatting. So I was looking for this. The conditional formatting is to create data. Hold on one second. Let me get on the right letter. To highlight the carrier whose on-time percentage decreased from the previous year to the current year. So you should have had something like this. Also notice you need to have calculated the change on time percentage, and that's just this value minus this value. So that gives you this. Then you were asked to do data bars based on the change on percentage, so you should have something that looks like this. If you missed any of these, again, another half a point. Then the last question asks, which carrier should Ohio Logistics try to use in the future? You know, I'd say several of you were going for this Jones Brothers because they had the largest percentage. But that's not the correct way to be thinking about it. They still had only on-time percentage of 82%. You should be using any of these first 4 that had the highest percentages of on time. That should be what you're looking at. Again, if you were choosing something other than one of those 4, I took off a 0.5. The next problem to look at is problem number 5. And so you're given this data here. You're asked to find the frequency or the number of times it's occurred over here. And so what you can do is use the COUNTIF function. Notice the COUNTIF function uses all of this for what it's looking for. So this would be your input, your data range right here. Notice that this is absolute. I saw several of you who didn't have this first part absolute, so when you copied this down, the next one went A3, the next one A4, and A5, which means that the numbers that you're getting over here are wrong. Then you had to sum rather, the total number of observations that you're seeing here. And from that, you can get the percentages. So if we take this value divided by this value, notice H7 is a mixed addressing, so that when you copy that down, the column H stays the same, and then you go from there. So notice it stayed at H7 the same. I'm using somebody else's solution here, but ideally that probably should have stayed absolute at the beginning at the top, and that way you could copy it down. You wouldn't have to worry about doing individual ranges for that formula. Then you should have created a column that had percentages in it, which is nothing more than this column times 100, and then format that as percentage, or you could format this as percentage. So if you did percent frequency, you could do, let's say, equals this. I'm just going to copy that down, and then we could format that as percent. And so that's as easy as it gets, and it also puts the percent signs on the screen for you. So you always want to make it easy for your reader to see exactly what they're looking at. So we now know that this is a percentage. So if we scroll down, we see that Google is the most visited site and Yahoo is the second most visited. And we can see that by its 28% here and then 26% here. So that's what I was looking for. And that's somehow you should have presented that. I like how this person presented the information here. It's very concise. It's all on one screen. And so the user doesn't have to be scrolling all over the place to see it. The next problem is problem 7. And you can see here that it's laid out. We've got our different industry here. We do our initial calculation here. Notice it's a count if. The current range is absolute, and we're just looking for these values here. We get our total here of the number of observations or the number of industries times that each of these was mentioned. And then we can come back here and we again calculate our frequency, and then we convert that to percentage. So the main thing here is I'm looking for these percentages. Also that cell phone companies had the highest number of complaints. So if you got all that, you got all the points. Otherwise, you missed a half a point or more depending on how much of the problem you completed. Moving on to problem 8. We had some data of where do you live now versus where do you consider to be an ideal community. Again, I'm looking for getting the count. Notice that this is absolute. Some of you didn't make that first part absolute, which made all your numbers wrong, and sometimes you got the numbers right just because what changed up here didn't affect the actual count. So again, but be careful of where you're doing your absolutes for your ranges. Yeah, you do that for city, and then you do that for your relative frequency, which is, again, since we've got 100 here, it's going to be this amount. Let me move that over a little so you can see it. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll over here so you can see that. And so what you've got is these bins for column A, column B. You get the counts for each one of those. Notice these are at 100, so these are already at percentages if you want to just make them that. So all you really would have had to do is to make them a percentage, and because I'm going to undo this, they're not at 0.32, but all you had to do is divide by 100 on each of these to get this value down here. I've already converted that over here for these two. So this is that column A. Again, they're just the values here that are now percentages because you divided by 100. The column should be B here, where you want to live, or with the ideal community. And so the other thing that I was looking for on this one is okay, if this is, currently, and this is ideal, then what is the differences? Well, the differences is nothing more than taking the value of where you're currently at minus the value where it would be ideal, and you would see this sort of change. So there would be, a drop in city, let me just copy this down. And a drop of 1% from suburb. Small towns would actually go up 4%, and rural area would go up 5%. So if you didn't like this percentage, I would take it either way. You might want to do the column B minus the column A. That makes more sense to you. And then that's what I was looking for as an actual percentage that was leaving these areas, or going to these two areas. And that's what I was looking for in that problem. All right, the next problem is problem 11. So you got your waiting times. You were told what the size of your bins would be: 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19, and then 20 to 24. What I was looking for on this problem is your use of the array frequency function. So notice that this becomes the A2 to A21, and then you have your bins that are right here. And then you had to hit Control-Shift-Enter to enter that in. So what that does is that goes in there and looks for all the values that match that and gives you a frequency count. And then so you should have had numbers like this. Now I saw several of you, since these were small bin numbers, you would do a count if it's 4, count if it's 5, count if it's count if it's 1, count if it's 2, count if it's 3, count if it's 4. So you had this big long formula. And then I suppose you just copied it down and then changed the values that you're looking in there. So 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So you had 5 of them in that one. It's a lot easier to do the frequency, and that's what you should have been doing. Then you needed to do the relative frequency, and so you do that by thinking about what your total number that you've got here. Now this total is 20. It'd been easier if you used a function called count and just counted how many this was. And so that's 20 observations here, and then you get your percentage. And so the percentage would be this value, and this person used this value right here, divided by this value. So then you need to get these values in percentages, and then you need a cumulative frequency. So the layout here, I wanted to point this out, is not the best in the world because it's not reading linear left to right and top to bottom. But you can see what they've done for cumulative frequency here is then they just added up these numbers here. So 4 plus 8 is 12, plus 5 is 17, and so on. Then they did the percentages again. So it's nice that they laid out this at less than 4, less than or equal to 4 was 20%, and the less than or equal to 9 is 60%, which gives us the answer to the last part, which is 60% of the proportion of customers who wait 9 minutes or less is not 6%, but 60%. So again, I'm showing this as one of those areas that you need to pay attention to and make sure you're getting the right answer. Right? And that person would have known this had they converted these values to the percentages. So we'll just say equals this. You highlight them all and then hit the percentage format. Okay, so be careful that you know the difference between your percentages and just decimals. Right? So if you have to multiply by 100 to get it into 100%, it's 2 decimal places over, not 1. The next number was number 13. And so if you look at that, it's fairly straightforward. You have your numbers. You use the median function. Use the average function to get your mean. Do the same thing with your additional value and see what those changes are. And that's what I was looking for. So if again you miss anything there, it was 0.5 off. And I've already placed in the chapter 2 second part the solution to problem number 17, so you know how that is done. So that is how I was grading this week, and so hopefully you'll look at that, understand your mistakes, and be a little more careful and lay out your worksheets a little better so it's easier for me and anybody else to read and know what you're doing.